This episode was originally recorded in May 2020. In this episode, I speak to MaryAnn Kerr about gaslighting toxicity in the workplace. We discuss bravery in the workplace and the reluctance of others to deal with it and the consequences for those that do. We talk about how socialized mavericks deal with this dynamic and how society deals and accepts toxic environments. In this discussion, we also talk about the need for trust and first followers and how maverick leadership is more nuanced than just being a maverick, like Top Gun. This is an interesting and nuanced conversation about leadership. Do listen up. Before we begin our conversation, here is a quick shout out to the pathologically curious. Check out the Maverick Paradox magazine. It's a digital magazine written by Mavericks for business owners and professionals. You can find the magazine at themaverickparadox.com. The magazine's aim is to provoke maverick leadership everywhere. Welcome to the Maverick Paradox podcast, where we explore what it is to be a maverick and discover effective modes of leadership. I am Judith Germain, and my mission is to propel the maverick mindset into a world where character and integrity will ultimately have a higher premium than personality and bureaucracy. So thank you for joining me on this journey. If you would like to continue with me, then please subscribe to my podcast on iTunes, Stitcher, or one of the other popular podcast platforms. And today our guest is MaryAnn Kerr. Hi, MaryAnn.
Hi, Judith.
How are you today?
I'm great. I'm so happy to be chatting with you.
Me too. I'm kind of excited, actually, to talk to you today. But before we really kick into that conversation, I understand you're a maverick, but can you tell the listeners why you think you're a maverick?
Well, I think I'm a maverick, and I have for a long time. I think about 25 years ago, I had a coworker say to me, you shoot from the lip. You shoot from the lip. And she said it in a way that, personally, I thought that was kind of cool because I've always said what I see, spoken my mind. And so now I'm talking about a topic that seems to, people are really shy to talk about bullying in the workplace and toxicity in the workplace. And it's really impacted my relationships with people. So some folks who are leaders in the sector I work in, which is the social profit sector or charitable sector, who used to be really supportive of me, have suddenly slipped away. We'd say ghosted, I suppose. And it's because they don't like the topic I'm talking about.
Yeah, so it's interesting about the ghosting. Why do you think that's happened?
I think that there is concern that, people are afraid that they have to be perfect. So if they support something perhaps that I've written on LinkedIn that speaks to an imperfect workplace, and there's a fear that if they support that, they're seen as thinking that they never make those kinds of mistakes. Does that make sense? That they're afraid. They're afraid to support it because they don't feel as though they're, necessarily living up to what I'm hoping the sector can live up to.
Yeah. Do you think there's part of that an integrity issue? Because sometimes I think if you're a socialized maverick and you really stand in that integrity place, that light can make other people feel quite dull.
Yeah, I do think that's a part of it. But, for me, the thing that's interesting is the ghosting has happened from leaders who are, extremely well reputed in terms of the work that they do. So that's why I miss them, right? I mean, you wouldn't necessarily notice when some people kind of drop off or disconnect and that sort of thing. But there are some key leaders in the sector who at one point were quite supportive. And then when I really started to call out behaviors, disappeared. And so I think they have great integrity around the content of their work, but they're not yet ready to lead around tough topics.
Yeah. Yeah. So for me, I still think that's maybe I'm just too black and white about it, but it still feels like an integrity issue, because it's like if they like you and support you, but they don't want to support you publicly, it's like they're more concerned about their reputation by association. And unless you've done something really horrifically bad, which they can't support, then that doesn't seem right.
Right.
Am I making it too simple?
No, I don't disagree. I don't disagree at all. I guess I just think there's maybe a yes and, because it's like this, when you talk about things like the Me Too movement, and people are starting to talk about sexual harassment and assault and violence in the workplace. The people that stand up and speak about that are considered brave, right? Courageous. Yeah. We say good for you for speaking out. But when we talk about these other things, bullying and toxicity and so on, we don't get that same response. And I'm trying to give folks the benefit of the doubt by saying that perhaps they're not ready to talk about it, right? Perhaps being brave is not their thing. Perhaps being associated with this issue, they feel would hurt their brand in some way.
Yes,
right?
And they are important considerations. I was just thinking, my brain went off a bit when you mentioned the Me Too, because what I've seen is that, when a celebrity comes out and says something, everyone's quite supportive.
Yeah.
But if it happens in the workplace, that same person who's supportive of some famous person is like advising the woman in the workplace with just don't rock the
Oh, absolutely. I'm thinking more about people who have really publicly stated, written articles for the newspaper, really publicly stated that this happened to them. So but when it's happening in the workplace, there's no question. I mean, I've experienced it myself where, a leader has said to me, just it's not that big of a deal. Just, don't worry about it. And we'll make sure you're not left alone with that person. And, those kinds of comments, which are shocking, right? That we have created.
You'll really ruin his career if you bring it up.
Right, that's right. You'll ruin their career. Imagine, and no thought at all to how it's and what the reason I see a real correlation between these things is that if you've been in a toxic environment and if you've been bullied, there's this thing about bullying specifically where someone else would say, well, what happened? I wouldn't consider what happened to you bullying. And there is a similarity here. Some people have a higher tolerance for sexist comments and behavior, for racist comments and behavior, right? I mean, unacceptable. And yet certain people to whom it's happening have developed a sort of barrier around it and said, I can let that go. I'm just going to let that go. And it's a personal choice they've made to do that, right? It's not what I agree with, but it's a choice they've made. And the impact of those things, the impact of any kind of harassment, sexual harassment, racial discrimination, these things have the same kind of impact as being bullied, right? It's very similar. It's traumatic.
You know what I was thinking again? I like talking to you because you're making me think. But I was where my brain went was that kind of, like Maslow's hierarchy of needs. I know it's been discredited, but the idea of it made me think that we have a hierarchy of values, don't we, and priorities. And whilst you may say, I will not accept X, Y, Z, but if it happens in that scenario, you then have to look at some other things as well. It's like, well, if I speak out and I lose my job, then I can't look after my family, or so I will put up with it to this point, and then I'll make it. So it's almost they're almost. Actually, it's not that. It's not values. I think values are fixed. I think it's more your principles. I'm a bit stuck now if it's your principles or your values, but I think some things are absolutely, I will never do this. Another thing is like, I'll only do this to this point because something else takes priority.
Yeah. And I think some people, and I would include myself in this, have kind of a stronger sense of empathy than others, and that empathy gene can get you in trouble, because sometimes it's not, it's not just you that's having something happen to you at work, but you're seeing other people mistreated, and that impacts your ability to function well in an organization. And that has happened to me numerous times, and that's unfortunate, but it's values based, because for me, inclusivity is a value, and so is love and kindness, right? So when I see that not happening, I have to respond to it. I'm literally not able to control that. And when I started to speak publicly about this, I talked to my partner and I said, what's going to happen if I start to talk about this? And the things we imagined did happen. I was threatened with lawsuits. People drifted away who I cared a lot about. And I knew I was risking ever working for another organization in a traditional way. I knew that the chances that someone would now hire me, because I'm now seen as a troublemaker, right?
That's quite a principled stand to make. And I think a lot of Mavericks do make those principled stands. I think it's because it becomes an identity piece.
Right. It's who I am.
It's who I am, so it's very hard not to. Are you able to say what sector that was, or would you rather not?
No, I mean, it's in the social profit sector. All of my work, I've worked for 33 years in the charitable sector. So working for different organizations, in healthcare, environment, women's sector, all trying to make the world a better place, to mend the world, as a friend of mine once said, and I love that term.
Mm. Okay, so if we look generally speaking, how do you think Mavericks, or socialized Mavericks in particular, should deal with toxic environments that they find themselves in? And the reason I ask is because quite often, whenever you hear toxic and Maverick, it's normally the Maverick that's the toxic one.
Yeah, I wish I had a solution. I think that it so depends on the situation and the person. And I would say you're right. Very often, that kind of toxicity has come from someone who is kind of egotistical, they're narcissistic, they're, they may care, for instance, in my sector, about the cause that they work for, but they also care a lot about, I don't know how many times they're in the media, on TV and radio, they're on a panel, elevated in some way personally, because it's about them and not the work. So I think you have to tread pretty carefully. I think it's really important to find friends at work. And if you can't find friends at work, that's going to be, I think it's very much a number one factor for why people don't stay, because if too many people have decided they're just going to put their heads down and carry on, and you don't have anyone that you can say, this is happening, this has happened, it's a very lonely, isolating place to be. And of course, you can, if you are lucky enough to work in a place with a great HR team, a talent and culture team who truly care about the employees and not just about, making sure that all of the, policies and procedures are in place and we're not breaking the law, then HR is always an option. But my experience with HR has not been that.
I think, it can be really difficult. And I think each HR department is quite different. I mean, I talk from someone who was head of HR at quite senior levels. And I would agree that not every HR professional sees things in the same way.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that in itself can cause problems.
Well, there's a woman here in the United States. I'm in Canada, but in the United States, who her name is Claude Silver, and she works for Vayner Media, and she's called the Chief Heart Officer. And she posts a lot on LinkedIn. And if you have a chance to chat with her, you will love how she approaches HR, because I think she does it in a human-centered way. Right? It's about the people, not the policies and procedures.
Yes, and I think HR's a difficult place to be, in the sense that you really are in the middle and you're trying to serve two very distinct groups of individuals. It may be even three, really. You've got the organisation as a whole, you've got the management team, and you've got the employee team. I've always seen like HR very much like a volleyball match.
Yeah.
So like the HR sitting on that big chair right at the top, looking over, and sometimes the ball falls over, and you come down from the chair, you pick it up from the employees, and you go no, and you give it to the managers, and the game goes on. Other times you go to the managers and go no, and you give it to the employees. But you are that kind of impartial judge that looks, you can see what's equitable, what's right, what's just, and not look at it from the managers need this and the employees need that, but just look at the wholeness of it and say,
exactly,
what's the right thing to do? And I think there are quite a few people that would struggle in any sort of department to actually sort of face that challenge. And I think that comes from really knowing who you are and what you stand for and what you believe is right. What is objectively right.
Yeah, I love that. I mean, imagine, and I think that there is a movement towards that kind of HR. There's things like the Humans First movement and Disrupt HR and those sorts of things. But I think about it like this. We hear lots of people use that quote that rising tides raise all boats. If you thought about HR as that, right? How that, think about it from that perspective, it would totally change the function within an organization.
It's interesting because when I do Maverick Leadership within organizations, one of the essence of it is that ability to be trusted, trustworthy, and engender trust. Because as a Maverick, you would never follow a leader you don't trust. You just wouldn't do it. So therefore, my view is if you can manage or harness a Maverick, you can manage anybody.
Right.
So, and I sort of think if you can get the leadership to truly lead and get the employees to truly lead themselves, then you have very little friction because you have everybody trying to work for what the common good is.
Right. Yeah, and I mean, trust takes time and effort, right? I mean, to get there require, it all comes down to relationships, and relationships take time and effort. And I think that too often we have leadership, and I'm thinking more broadly, let's say a leadership team or the C-suite, who really, they don't know the people that work for them or work with them, right? They know them in the context of their jobs. So the idea that someone, what has all of their life been before they got to the office or to the factory, or all of the things that have happened to them in the course of a day before they've even hit the workplace, and all of the things that are on their minds, whether it's kids or older family members, or all of the things that make up life. We need to make space for that in our workplaces.
Yeah, and it's curious, isn't it? Because I think that when you think about leadership and the fact that, we've been studying leadership for over 100 years and still can't seem to figure out, the tenets of how to treat people properly.
Right.
And you just sort of think it isn't as hard as people make out, but you have to really... you have to care though. You have to care what the employee's going through, because they're not a commodity. And even if we reach the place where everything is AI, everything is, machine learning, if you don't care about this AI, just go look at Terminator or something, because because you still need to care about a sentient person.
Yeah.
You have to still care about it.
Yeah. I just read a fascinating book called Believership by Mike Vacanti. It's a very new, it's just out, maybe been out about 6 weeks or so. And he talks about the current leadership model that we use literally globally is broken. Right. And so his whole concept is based on, again, a humans first approach, a humane approach, that humanity is at the center of it all. And that for someone to follow you, and he tries to move away from the leader follower language, but for someone to follow you, essentially, they have to believe in you and they have to believe in what you're doing. And belief comes also from trust. Right. If I trust you, Judith, I will believe even when you say or do something it may not quite, it's not quite what I would have thought, but I'm going to I'm going to keep going. I'm going to invest in this relationship because I trust and believe in Judith.
Yeah, that so reminds me of my first proper manager in my first proper real job. And I was about 17, and this guy, now I look at him and think he was such a socialised maverick. And everybody just trusted him. And I remember one time he said, right, we need to do this piece of work, and everybody in the department needs to come in, and we need to do overtime for the next 6 weeks. But I have no money to pay you. This is like the times where people like, if you had to like work an extra minute, it's like, we're going on strike. It was like, yes. it was that kind of environment. And he was like, and I've got no money to pay you, but you need to do it. And we went, okay, right. So, and we went back, and after about an hour, somebody said, why are we doing this thing? What's the rationale for it? Because we didn't need to be told. And I was like, I don't know. Someone had asked him, and he said, oh, blah, blah, blah. I said, oh, okay. But that showed me true leadership, because he's basically saying, in a hugely unionised environment where, when the company wanted us to work an extra hour a week, everyone was like, we're going to go on strike, you're the main that's doing it. And then this guy is saying 6 weeks, you have to come in on Saturdays, some Sundays, to work because I need to come in. And we all about 30 people, we just said, yeah, fine, what day do we start? Nobody even asked him why, because we trusted him 100%.
Yeah, I love that story. And, I've had those experiences. I think there was one event I was involved with a few years ago, and there were 2 young women who were really essential to the success of that event. And they were probably among the most junior of employees at this organization. And they were literally there day and night for months, because they believed, right? At the end, they were part of the process. They believed in what we were trying to deliver. And I didn't even ask them. They just did it. And I mean, I tried to be there when they were there as much as I could, because I wanted them to know how much it mattered to me that they had put their hearts and souls into this. And I'm going to tell you that this event was spectacular. The outcomes in every way, people left moved. I had so many people afterwards telling me that they were just simply blown away by the couple of hours that we had all spent. I can't remember, there was about 800 people in attendance, and that came from them. Like I can pinpoint it right to them, because they managed every detail from a heartfelt place. It wasn't a job. Right? It didn't feel like work. I mean, it did, but they did it because they believed in where we were going, and that we were really a team making it happen, and it was phenomenal.
And I think the ability to, and I think that's a real good Maverick trait, that ability to inspire someone into doing something. And I think the big difference is, like, the extreme Maverick will manipulate you. So they'll tell you a story that manipulates your emotions to make you do something, which is probably not for your good.
Yeah.
Typically, and we'll look at we won't even think about any kind of politics when I say that. But if you look at socialised Mavericks, they'll tend to be able to narrate something good. Like, that you really, really want to go for. I remember years ago when I was a young manager, so I must have been I was senior manager, but I was something like 26 or something. And then another team member, a manager underneath me, and she was probably 40. So there's like a big difference in age. And I remember once she just said to me, I really wish you would run for Parliament. And I was like, what? I was like, and I said, right, because she'd already told me previously that she didn't like me, but she respected me. So I was like, that's okay. But we did eventually she did eventually start liking me. And I sort of said, well, why would you say that? She goes, because you wouldn't lie. You'd be the only politician I know that would actually stand and tell the truth. And I said, and that's probably why I couldn't be a politician. Right. Because you wouldn't survive, would you?
Yeah, no, absolutely not. Absolutely not. And, I think that's probably one of those traits of a socialized maverick, is that they are genuine and vulnerable, and those things matter, because it allows people to relate, again, on a human level, right? It's not that you're putting yourself above someone else. They may have to report to you, and you may have to fulfill all kinds of HR related functions, like performance reviews and so on, and, keeping track of days off and are they coming in on time, and all of those things that seem to matter that really don't, if you get right down to it. If you have the right relationship, if you have great, trusting, kind relationships with teams, then none of those little things matter.
I know. It saddens me that, when I go to an organisation and part of what I do is teach trust, that it's so new concept. It does sadden me. I suppose it's like you don't want. So I remember one of the things I did when I first started with this was, I remember like on a Sunday afternoon and sort of like crying because I had to go to work on the Monday. But but for me, I was crying because I was so underused that, I was using probably 10% of my ability, and it was just driving me crazy.
Yeah.
And everybody was going, gosh, the work's so good. It's like, I'm not doing anything. It's like, can't you see I'm so disengaged? I am actively got none of my brain involved anymore. And they're like, look at the output of this. It's so great. And you're like, oh. Yeah. Can't even not work well and still get accolades.
Isn't that crazy? It happens a lot.
It happens a lot with Mavericks.
Happens a lot. Yeah. And that I have a favorite exercise I use early on with teams that was Patrick Lencioni's work. And I'm not going to get this 100% right, but essentially you ask everyone around the table to answer a few questions about who they were when they were. So first of all, how many kids in your family and where you are in the birth order, and then to talk to a unique experience from your childhood that was kind of a defining moment, and how that affected you. And I'm blown away because even when you come into a team that has been together for a long time, there's another question, but those questions elicit a deep kind of emotional response from people when you ask them to kind of pause and remember who they were as a child and some of the things that happened to them. And almost always, every single person in the room learns something new about every single person around the table. And it immediately opens up a sense of vulnerability-based trust, right?
I was going to say, you really need to trust to do that, because
you do.
And whoever's facilitating that needs to be really good, because you can open up something really traumatic. Right.
So the trick is, in those situations, whoever is the leader. So if there's a CEO around the table, the CEO goes first. So they demonstrate vulnerability. Right. And of course, people are going, it's shaped to say, share something you're prepared to share. Right. I mean, we don't necessarily want to know about childhood trauma. Right. Unless somebody, if you're going to share that, it's because you're in a place where you're ready to share it. Right. So there is some need to massage that and make it a safe space. But the leader goes first and demonstrates, models vulnerability, and it makes a huge difference.
Yeah, I don't know. Unfortunately, I can't remember who it was that had done it, but there was this guy's got this theory about leadership being about teaching people how to be the first follower. I don't know if you saw the viral video saying that the real leader is the first follower, because that's the one that teaches everybody else.
I love that. I haven't seen that, but I love that.
If I find it, I'll send it to you. But
thank you.
It's really brilliant because
it is.
Because the video has, I think, there's this one guy and he's dancing on a beach, just really weird dancing, like arms everywhere and everything else, and everyone's just kind of watching him, thinking, "You look a bit weird." And then this other guy gets up and starts dancing with it, like they're not together. You can see it, and he just starts doing it. And then the second guy starts calling his friends over, and then they come, and then they call other people. And before you know, you've got 100 people dancing really weird. And the idea was the real leader is the second guy, because he showed people what to do next.
Right.
And it really made me sort of think about it and thought, well, that's what leadership, isn't it? Because I've always thought leadership's is about role modelling. So you are a
Right.
role model because you role
Right.
model everything, don't you? You role model
Right.
mum, dad, teacher, whatever. You're on all the roles. And that's what you do, isn't it? So if you're a role model, you are role modelling that change. So you are the first follower, aren't you? You're saying this is how you should do this thing that we want you to do. And then when you're in like organisations and you've got like the corporate vision and the mission, and nobody ever seems to be able to translate it into action, the good socialised maverick looks at that and goes, oh, I get it. And then they model what that means. So everybody else then follows them because they've demonstrated how you take this ephemeral thing and turn it into something real.
Yeah, I love that. I'm envisioning writing something about that. I love it. I really do.
Yeah, and I think all good leaders are first followers, aren't they? In a way, let me demonstrate you how to be what you want to be. Let me show you how it's done.
Right, and I mean a lot of academics describe leadership really as being, the action of helping others navigate the world. Right, helping others figure stuff out, and that's the kind of really bottom line of what leadership really is.
I don't know if you've ever seen anything by John Maxwell, but he captured my thought processes probably around 2006 or something like that, when he brought out a book. I think he's renamed it now, but he brought out a book that says something like leadership is influence, nothing more, nothing less. And that just kind of completely captured me, and I thought, that is it.
Yeah.
That is it.
Yeah. A lot of I words: influence, inspiration, right? These are key leadership traits.
Yeah, and for me, when I talk about maverick leadership, I talk about it's what you do and who you are.
Right. I agree. I love it. I think it's a brilliant word, and it's not one we hear a lot anymore. So when I saw it, I thought, oh, isn't that brilliant?
Well, the new Maverick film comes out soon, so no doubt everyone will be Maverick something.
Oh, okay, there we go.
I know, it'd be just like, and I'll be like, no, that's not Maverick. That's just being a pain in the neck.
I love it.
Because the new Top Gun film is actually called Top Gun Maverick.
Oh, great. I was not a huge Top Gun follower in the original version, so
I think for me, because when I first started doing all this stuff about Maverick, everybody was saying things like, oh, you mean like Top Gun? And I'd be like,
yeah. No, I don't mean that.
But some of those traits that he demonstrates is Maverick, but what it is, for me, Maverick is quite nuanced and it's quite deep, and it comes with a whole load of other stuff. Whereas I think a lot of people, when they think Maverick, they think of Top Gun, this naughty man running around doing all the things that we can't do but we really want to do, and he's so cheeky and charming. And yes, the cheeky and charming is there and the risk taking is there, but it's much deeper than just being cheeky.
Well, and I think that's a beautiful word too. I think very much about leadership is nuanced, right? And there's a lot of intuition in it, and there's a lot of sensing and trying to make sense of things, and symbolism. So nuanced is a fantastic description of what leadership is.
Yeah. So we've had a very interesting meander through leadership, and I'm quite enjoying this conversation. And I want to take back to that toxic environment, because I've been sort of thinking. I have multiple thinking tracks going on, and I was thinking about something I wrote in my book where I sort of saying that if you have a socialised maverick and an extreme maverick in the same place, and the environment is a supportive, non-toxic one, the socialised maverick would be able to deal with the extreme maverick and calm that situation down and get it all working. Because the socialised maverick isn't driven by emotion. It's quite objective and quite analytical. But if you're in an environment where it's toxic, it's a toxic environment, then the extreme maverick will always win, because for the socialised maverick to be able to deal with the situation and that toxicity, they need to decide to act like an extreme maverick, and that's a real hard barrier for a socialized maverick to cross. Not like it won't be crossed, but they need to be pushed very hard to get to that point of where they go, right, fine, this is what I'm going to do to get it sorted.
Yeah,
they'd rather leave.
Yeah, which is why I think we need to work on this from a sort of systems level rather than looking at it on an individual basis or even an organizational basis. Because as long as we exist in systems that support the extreme maverick and say that's the way to be and that's the way to succeed, and we're okay with that, as long as, workplaces support that, then I think we're always going to have this difficulty with, and I think this difficulty for people who are socialized mavericks who will struggle, because what I see a lot of hurt people out there, a lot of really great, smart, driven, brilliant people who get crushed in organizations that are led by extreme mavericks, because they are, in fact, socialized mavericks. And so I think that's why I am focused on rising above things at an organizational level and saying, let's try to make systems change here around what we think is acceptable.
And I think that's true. And I think extreme mavericks would work hard to push a socialised one out, because they know that they're probably the only ones who has the power to do anything.
Yeah. Well, and the other thing is, an extreme maverick does not like the fact that people like the socialized maverick. And maybe don't like them, right? They don't like that, because a socialized maverick, it draws people to them, right? People are drawn to them. And so when they see that, especially at a leadership level, a leader who is an extreme maverick is going to say, no, we can't let that continue. I need to be the most liked.
You know what? I worked in an organisation, and it was quite funny because the director, so there was me, and then there was my equivalent on the business side. And then there was this director, and me and this other guy, we just didn't get. I liked him, but we just couldn't get on, and I couldn't understand, because he was a really nice guy, right? It was like, all things being equal, we should like each other, but somehow we wasn't. And eventually you go, I need to because when I talk to him on a one-to-one, we get on, but somehow something happens. And then what I found out was the director was basically trying to play both of us. So he was like, oh, this guy, he said this about your department, and now I'm going to have to do that. And they'd be like, she did this, and she says you should be disciplined. And none of it was ever true. That me and this other guy were very similar, both kind of socialised fabric. So once we actually sat and chatted about it, it was like, yeah, we can make this into a game. So we ended up both our departments being very strong, to the point where if one of us was off, the other one, we would say to our team, if anything happens, just go to that one, go to that manager, and even if it's really confidential, you go to him, because he'll look out for us.
That is such an interesting story. I had the exact experience, but we didn't figure it out until and this woman. I mean, everybody, we should have been friends in every way. I was like, what is the barrier here? What is happening? And later I discovered there was all kinds of stuff going on in the background, being said that I said and I done, and it simply wasn't true. And so you can't deal with things that are not transparent, right? If it's not out on the table, and you're not going to be able to fix it. So that was that experience, but it was very similar. And I always felt a little sad, actually, that we were never able to see our way, because we didn't have that great resolution that you did.
I think it's because both of us were socialised mavericks, so we both want to work for the greater good. We both wanted the company to succeed. Yeah, and we kind of both wanted each other to succeed, and we couldn't figure out. And it didn't last very long, because of that need to be transparent. It's just like, right, X. Yeah. What is your problem? Because this is what I don't understand what it is. And because you're always doing that, and it's like, stop! I'm not doing that. You're not doing that? No. And then it's like, but I heard no. And then it was just like, Oh. So we had this really good conversation. Then we went out for a beer afterwards.
Yeah.
And then we had a game plan.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's funny because I tried some of that. Like I tried to initiate, having a glass of wine and so on. But there was so much suspicion by this point. There was such a lack of trust that even that did not work. So there was, so she had a barrier go up, right? There was a wall there. By the time I was starting to figure it out, and it was really too late, but there it is.
Yeah, I think we had the advantage of when you looked at about how each of us were operating within the organisation, there was a high level of integrity by both of us. So,
yes.
So when you actually took the emotion out of it, it didn't make any sense. It's
right.
like, I see this, but I hear this, and something's not right, because either my eyes are failing me,
right,
or my ears are. One of this is not gelling. So I think it was that readiness to say, something about this isn't right. So let's work out what it is.
Well, good for you.
And we are friends to this day.
Oh, so good.
Over a decade later,
So good. Those are good news stories. I like those.
We need a good news story.
We do.
Okay, so I think we're almost at the point of ending this fantastic conversation. But before we do that, is there any tips or tricks on anything you would like to share? Your free choice today.
Oh, I love that. Well, I think the thing that's come to me as a result of our conversation is just to remind people that, there's some strength in coming at work from a values-based perspective. So know yourself, know what matters to you, even write them down. There's lots of online tools to help you, figure out what your values are and put labels on them. And so I want people to spend that time knowing what matters to them and finding workplaces that reflect that.
Oh, thank you. That's a really good tip. Would you come back again at some point and talk about something else?
Oh, I would love to. It's been fun. I've really enjoyed it. And you made me think a lot too. I love that.
That's great. Thank you so much. Thank you once again for tuning into the Maverick Paradox podcast. I hope you have enjoyed listening to my conversation with MaryAnn as much as I enjoyed having it. At the Maverick Paradox, we improve your impact and influence by enabling you to effectively strategize, innovate, and execute. To find out more, contact us at judith@maverickparadox.com. Thank you. If you are pathologically curious and would love to find out more about the Maverick Paradox, then please subscribe to this podcast on one of the popular podcast platforms. Alternatively, you could explore our resources on Mavericks at maverickparadox.com or read the Maverick Paradox magazine. We publish frequently each week. If you subscribe, you will get our monthly newsletter. And let's not forget my book, The Maverick Paradox, The Secret Power Behind Successful Leaders. For those that love a good discussion, you could apply to join our exclusive Facebook group. Finally, if you would like to work with us or are interested in the Maverick at work, check out maverickparadox.co.uk.